way on how to bring that availability down here. This is something that really we should have been working on for at least 5 years ago, because right now we just don't have anything, and it's going to take a lot of money, time, effort, partnership to work with the internet companies and private businesses to bring high-speed internet down here. And that's another reason why maybe some businesses are not coming down here, is because we don't have that bandwidth. So this has to be a priority. And I just feel that we've been, let down by our current, leadership positions. And we really need to put a large effort on that going forward.
Thank you. We will now be asking Ms. Raya the same question, and this is, what are you or will you do to improve internet service in Morgan Hill? You have 90 seconds to answer.
I love this question. I have a sophomore in high school that is in school remotely. And I'm telling you that this is a huge problem in Morgan Hill, and it has been the 13 years I've been here. And I think what I'd really like is for the community to have innovative ideas and we come together with some solutions. I do love the idea that if we're gonna entice high-tech people down here, that we either provide it, or once they get here, they're gonna go, we'll take care of it. I guess that's wishful thinking, but the idea is that we need something that is fast and that can accommodate this growing city. Thank you.
Thank you for your response. We will now ask Mr. Carr to answer the same question, and this is, what are you or will you do to improve internet service in Morgan Hill? You have 90 seconds to answer.
Great question. This is a super important one for us, as internet and broadband service is not something that government provides. So we have to work very closely with the private sector in bringing it and improving it in our community. Today, what we have been doing is we have, as a result of some of the things that have happened with shelter in place, in working with our school district, we've identified where the real holes in the network are, where the kids that are learning from home are having difficulty. And we've been working with the school district to provide hotspots and try to fill in some of those spots. We are also working with the private sector to say, how can we leverage the service that the city needs into a partnership with the private sector to expand the infrastructure out into those areas where it is lacking today. The system is a network, and there is infrastructure that is needed, and the private sector needs to put that in. So as we put out an RFP to say the city needs a lot of these services at our own facilities, and that's a pretty nice contract for the private sector. And those that are interested in that contract, then we work with them to say, if you want this contract with the city, we want you to help us expand this service out into the neighborhoods. We know where the needs are, where the holes are, and how do we get it out there. The business park is something that we've been working with the private sector to help bring more service into our business parks so that companies get the service they need as well. But it's a partnership between government and the private sector to make it work.
Thank you. We will now move to the third question, starting with Ms. Raya, and the question is, how do you think the police should be monitored to verify that they are not performing their job in a biased manner? You have 90 seconds to answer this question.
How do I think they should be monitored? Well, it's interesting because I feel, and this isn't totally about defunding the police, I hear the question, but this idea that if we reallocate funds away from the police department, it's not going to make Morgan Hill safer. We are one of the safest cities in the country. So I believe that, you know, the recent Senate Bill 1421, which really is about checks and balances for police officers, especially when there's been a shooting and death, that we look at internal affairs material and we put a report together so that it's clear what took place and that there's some kind of culpability and responsibility with the outcome. And I think that Senate bill is really going to support making sure that our police are doing what they need to be doing, which I believe they already are. So thank you so much.
Thank you. We will now be asking Mr. Carr the same question, and this is, how do you think the police should be monitored to verify that they are not performing their job in a biased manner? You have 90 seconds.
Thank you. Morgan Hill Police Department is the best in the business. We're very lucky to have both the officers on the beat, their support staff, and the command leadership that we have in place in Morgan Hill to keep us safe and to continue making us a safe community and one of the safest communities in California. That being said, I think there are many things that we could be working on in partnership with the command staff and the rank and file officers of the Morgan Hill Police Department. The body that oversees the police department is your city council and is the elected members of your city council. And that is our civilian board that oversees the police department today. Our department, as I said, they do a great job, and we always need to make sure that we're providing them the resources to keep them trained, to keep them prepared for whatever issues happen in Morgan Hill. And in a community like us, we need to make sure that we're training them properly for the community policing that our department has been a hallmark of for many, many years. Our leadership in our diverse leadership in our police department has been about community dialogues and making sure that we are serving the community and all aspects of the community in proper ways and in ways that the community expects. I'm honored to be supported by the Morgan Hill Police Officers Association because I work so closely with them and the command staff on making sure they have the resources that they need to be the proper department for Morgan Hill.
Thank you. And we will now ask Mr. Borgioli the same question. And this question is, how do you think the police should be monitored to verify that they are not performing their job in a biased manner? You have 90 seconds to answer.
I was fortunate enough to take a 4.5-month class last year that was given by the Morgan Hill PD. And it went into every single aspect of the police department, including training. And I remember several aspects of training for how to respond to a call in different types of neighborhoods. But, you know, the bottom line is we have to use data, and we have to collaborate and talk with the police department. Again, my 4.5 months, I got to know the police and the police department, you know, in a very close manner. So, for example, we also have to look at how our police are responding to certain calls in areas that have high populations of Hispanic or Black. Does the officers have the same perception and mentality in responding to these ethnic groups and color groups, you know, without a bias? You have to look at the equity lens in this particular case. I don't think we have enough data right now from what I see that we can make a good analysis. So I think we have to have a real good understanding of the existing training that they have. We also need to work with the county on implementation of crisis teams to help police when responding to domestic violence calls.
Okay.
Thank you.
We will be moving to the fourth question now, and we will begin with Mr. Carr. This question is, what are the ways that the city can address climate change locally, and how, in your views, does it tie itself to responsible growth? You have 90 seconds to answer this question.
Climate change is a real challenge in our world today and something that we need to recognize. The biggest greenhouse gas emitter in Morgan Hill, and our biggest challenge is that of transportation. I serve on the Valley Transportation Authority Board of Directors, representing the cities of Morgan Hill and Gilroy. And it has been my role on that board to make sure that we maintain the services we have in South County and do our best to try to improve those services. We've been able to preserve the express bus routes that we have that are the long haul routes that Morgan Hill and other South County residents use to get up to work in the North County area. Most of those routes are struggling today because of the restrictions of sheltering in place and COVID. But those are our biggest challenges. We've addressed some of the other challenges by taking a look at reach codes, which take a look at homes and buildings that are being built in Morgan Hill. How can they be built more green? How can they be built more sustainable? How can they be built in ways that do not create more greenhouse gases and therefore lead to more changes and challenges in our climate? And we have other codes that we are looking at and could continue to work on those. When it comes to the growth of our community, it very much is a part of climate change, and whether we grow out or whether we grow up internally plays a big part in whether our community is going to be one that recognizes climate change and addresses it, or does not recognize the science.
Thank you. We will now ask Mr. Borgioli the same question, and this question is, what are the ways that the city can address climate change locally? How, in your view, does it tie itself to responsible growth? You have 90 seconds to answer.
Well, I think we have to really also get input from the citizens and the city alike. In other words, get the citizens' ideas. Because for me, for an example, my home is a solar home. I've reduced my carbon footprint by about 90%, and I have other things I'm going to do to reduce it even more. So everybody has to, take responsibility for the carbon footprint. And, you have to look also at the city's emergency plan to ensure it's up to date, and meeting with, the appropriate, fire department, police chiefs, emergency managers, public works. I think we can really put a plan together to convert all the city's gasoline vehicles to electric. We can figure out ways on how to put more electric charging stations in downtown area, not only just one or two in the garage. And again, really look at what buildings do not have solar at the city and put solar in. Solar right now is so affordable, and the return on investment is tremendous. So those are some of the ways that I think we can look at the city's carbon footprint and the overall impact on the environment. I like the idea of partnerships with local companies to explore ways to reduce the carbon footprint and develop these ideas and implement plans with the existing companies in town. For example, Paramount. I mentioned that before.
Borgioli, that was
so, yes.
Thank you. We will now be moving on to the third candidate for this question. Ms. Raya, the question is, what are the ways that the city can address climate change locally? How, in your view, does it tie itself to responsible growth? You have 90 seconds to answer.
Thank you for the question, and I agree with a lot of what Larry and Gino said. Our Earth is so important. The greenhouse emissions are out of control. I do believe in electric cars, having a fleet of electric cars replacing the current cars in the county. I love the idea of trains becoming electric. I also think that we need to keep space. We need to keep open space and agriculture, because the more we intrude on open space, the more we affect the climate and everything around us. I also believe that we all have a part in this, and solar is important, and tidal is important, and wind is important, and using these other forms of energy. I also believe that we need to hear the voice of the people in Morgan Hill. And we want to make sure that whatever we do is in the best interests of this city and the people here, and that it's affordable. Thank you.
Thank you. And we will be now moving to the final question of this segment, starting with Mr. Borgioli. The question is, the city of Morgan Hill needs revenue. Investors construct developments based on what has been profitable in the past, not on what is good for our city. What are you planning to do to get information and advice on what the city should build on its industrial land? Your time of 90 seconds starts now.
Well, I've already mentioned some things before, but, we only have two choices facing us, cut services or raise taxes, and neither are good. But let's take a step back. At the end of 2019, the city has $7 million deficit and couldn't fund basic safety services like fire and EMS and road repair, and we're in a 10-year economic boom last year. So the city is really obligated in their constitution to provide targeted levels of service to protect the citizens of Morgan Hill. And the residents expect their leaders to provide basic level services. So the only way to do that is to bring in diverse businesses. As I mentioned, I gave an example before, where you can bring in livable wage employees with office buildings, not a concrete bunker like the Shoe Palace, and certainly not like Trammell Crow that only has a limited amount of minimum wage employees because of its highly robotic fashion. So despite, knowing that we can attract advanced manufacturing and tech companies, really our leaders focused on these e-commerce distribution centers. So, what I would like to do is life science pioneers like Paramount and bring in, as an example of that, healthcare facility that's just sitting idle in the city. So this is the key to bringing in tax revenue. Bring in
Thank you.
New businesses.
We'll be moving to the next candidate for this question. Ms. Raya, this question is directed at you. The city of Morgan Hill needs revenue. Investors construct developments based on what has been profitable in the past, not on what's good for our city. What are you planning to do to get information and advice on what the city should build on its industrial land? You have 90 seconds to answer this question.
First and foremost, I think it's important that we are listening to what the people in our districts are telling us and what their concerns are. And I don't want to assume, but when Gino's talking about this Kaiser Hospital, I think he's referring to Lillian Commons. And the idea here is that we have a hospital and then we have housing that is going to probably be close to the $1 million mark. And again, who can afford that? And how are we going to work collaboratively and get the right kind of revenue, the revenue that's going to benefit everyone, not just a few. And I think we're also dealing with a pandemic that is not going anywhere, that's actually on the rise. So we have to temper that with what we're doing now as far as how many, the retail places that are opening and the restaurants, and that's great. And I'm so proud of Morgan Hill for thinking outside of the box. But I think this is a very complex matter that we need to deep dive in, and we need to get the ideas of the people and what they're wanting. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, we have Mr. Carr answering the same question. And the question is, the city of Morgan Hill needs revenue. Investors construct developments based on what has been profitable in the past, not on what is good for our city. What are you planning to do to get information and advice on what the city needs, on what the city should build on its industrial land? You have 90 seconds to answer this question.
Great, thank you. I guess because of my years of experience, I've been able to be involved in broad-based community dialogues that have developed our general plans in Morgan Hill. Our zoning code and our industrial plans, our economic development blueprint, all developed with broad community-based discussions and experts in the fields. It's those things that map a certain direction and give us ideas about where the city should be going, what the right balance and mix is of zonings between residential, commercial, and industrial and public lands to make our city become one that is the best formed and the best diverse city that we can have. Now, that conversation that you're talking about is one that is a balance. Investors do have things that they want for a bottom line, but that doesn't mean that they get to control the conversation. As a council member, I get to have those discussions with developers and investors on what we believe is best for Morgan Hill. And if someone wants to bring an investment into Morgan Hill, which again is a good thing that private money wants to invest in Morgan Hill, Then we negotiate on what are the most qualified things and the best aspects for Morgan Hill. And again, the way that we do that is through broad-based community input that develops a general plan that is our roadmap for the future. It's a document that's a living and breathing document and should have updates and changes along the way so that we're always on top of whatever is best for Morgan Hill and whatever is going on with the times. And again, it's through that broad-based community dialogue that we develop it.
Thank you, all the candidates, for your responses. This concludes the end of the question section. We will now be hearing each of the candidates' 1-minute closing statement, beginning with Mr. Carr.
Thank you. I want to thank again the AAUW for putting this on and for everyone who is watching and listening tonight. As Morgan Hill's most experienced council member, I've provided leadership in making Morgan Hill one of the most desirable communities in California. We've made our community a place where safety and quality of life are priorities, a place where families and businesses are growing and flourishing. As your council member, I will continue to support managed and controlled growth. I passionately support open space and the preservation of agricultural resources. I will continue to be fiscally sound and responsible. I have and always will put public safety first and am proud to have the endorsement and support of both our police and firefighters. I ask that you please support my campaign with your vote. Though you and I may not always agree on every issue, you can always be confident of my knowledge of the issues, my abilities, and my positive ability to address them and how much I care about Morgan Hill. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carr. Our next candidate to give a 1-minute closing statement will be Mr. Borgioli. You have 1 minute.
Here's my promise to Morgan Hill. I won't let projects like the massive Trammell Crow Distribution Center continue without your approval. Trammell Crow will wreak havoc on our roads and pollute the air, and if not stopped, we will have 2,000 to 4,000 semi-trucks on our roads, adding to our congestion. The Shoe Palace got passed by a one-signature swipe of a pen on the current city council's watch. I won't let that happen. Well before COVID, at the end of 2019, we were in a budget crisis to the tune of $7 million. The city even declared a budget crisis and almost put a tax measure on the ballot this past March at the tune of $35,000. We as citizens pay enough tax, but because of the budget crisis now, this may be an option. However, I think there's an alternate way to bring in tax revenue by placing a high priority on bringing in diverse businesses with high-paying jobs. I will listen to you, the voters. I will be your voice at City Hall. I ask for your vote on November 3rd. Thank you.
Thank you. And our final candidate to give a 1-minute closing statement will be Ms. Raya, and you have 1 minute.
I want to thank you for including me. This organization, again, is quite amazing, and I'm just honored and privileged. I also want to thank Larry and Gino. I'm the newbie on the block, and I think that I've really appreciated their patience with me as I'm learning. I also want to thank my family and friends in the neighborhood, people that have put up my signs. I have not taken one dime in donations. I have not sought anyone to endorse me. This is completely grassroots, a decision I made on my own because I wanted a change in Morgan Hill. I wanted to be that agent of change along with people that have voices and want to be heard and want the best for the city. Thank you so much.
That concludes the end of our third portion of this forum. Thank you to all of our candidates and participants who have been hearing us. On behalf of the AAUW Morgan Hill branch, we would like to thank all of the candidates who participated in tonight's forum. Thank you, everybody.